everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. And for those of you watching on YouTube, yes, I am just a phantom voice today. With Rob and Tim missing last episode and me having to go solo, I decided we would showcase
Here we go.
Gentlemen today.
Here we go.
And make sure you all get your fill of them since I had a solo spotlight last week. But with that being said, I want to say hi, Tim, Rob. How you guys doing? This is our first time recording since the new year.
I'm loving this new format with you only having a voice on this one, Brian. I love it.
Yeah, makes things a lot easier, actually.
Yeah, I get to live out my fantasy. Like I said, face for radio, man. But, I'm really excited to kick off the new year. We've got a lot of great guests that are going to be joining us here in 2023. And we start off with one of the nicest people I've gotten to meet of late and has a very great story to share with us. I'd like to welcome to the show today, AJ Orr from Simple Plan IT. And AJ, we love to kick things off with you telling a little bit about yourself as kind of a starting point.
Thanks. I appreciate everything, Brian. The introduction. It's kind of like the Charlie's Angel thing. You're just the voice over the phone.
That's it.
So it's pretty cool.
That's right.
But as he said, my name is AJ Orr. I'm the founder and CEO of Simple Plan IT, which is a digital risk management firm. So we specialize in helping businesses, specifically those that have government contracts, protect their digital assets and be compliant with all the security regulations that the DoD pushes out. So that's really kind of what we focus on and what we do. And then in addition to that, I do a lot of work in the veteran support services and things of that nature, which would love to talk a little bit more about as we continue this conversation.
Perfect. So maybe start us out with a little bit of your history. We got a sense of where you are today and want to hear about that. But tell us how you found your way into the lovely world of IT.
Actually the military. So in the Army, I was a communication specialist. So I was a 31 uniform. So my job in the military was setting up field communications, tapping into satellites and things of that nature, which is really where I started my foray into technology. And so after I got out, I bounced around a lot, just trying to figure out where I fit in and where I was going to go. And ultimately ended up landing in, my first job in technology was actually back in 2003. Yeah, 2003, I started working for a company that was selling hosted VoIP. And me not knowing anything about B2B sales or really that kind of technology at that stage in the game, the guy that the owner was like, it's cutting edge technology. It's going to be the next greatest thing. And it sounded really good. What I didn't realize was back in 2003, the internet infrastructure wasn't what it is today. And so it was a horrible product. Well, the product was good. It was just a horrible delivery. And I was like, I'm tired of getting beat up left and right every time I sell this thing, that people are complaining about quality and this, that, and the other, and it's out of my control and everything depends on the network. I was like, there's got to be a better way. And in my process of working with selling this hosted VoIP solution, I realized that everything depended upon the network. So I became really good friends with a lot of IT providers in the area, just to say, hey, look, I need this network to be rock solid in order to put my stuff on. Can you come in and validate that this network is solid for me? And so I developed a bunch of those relationships. And finally, I got to the point where I no longer wanted to sell VoIP. And I was telling these guys, hey, I appreciate your help in all this. I'm moving on to something else. And one of the guys brought me on and said, hey, why don't you run sales and operation, our front end operations for my company over here? And so that's really kind of how I started stepping into the MSP world. I did that. So now we're fast forwarding to 2005, 2006. And I was doing that. And then I realized that as I started talking to more and more clients, I realized that they struggled with really analyzing and figuring out how to utilize technology and within their organization, or how to even differentiate the different solutions that they were looking at putting in their organization. And so a lot of times, I would talk to clients and be like, yeah, we're using this product over here. I'm like, well, how did you land on that? They're like, well, it was either the cheapest price or, the most ridiculous determining factor that I heard was, well, we like the colors of their logo. I was like, that's how you decided what technology
is important. Yeah. It's not nothing. Come on.
So as I started coming across instances like that and just shaking my head, I would tell I would also lead with integrity. And so there were some solutions, or not solutions, but some opportunities I would come across where the solution I represented wasn't the best fit for the client. I knew our skill sets and what we were really good at. And so, for example, we weren't very strong when it came to dental practices or HIPAA as it was back in that day. And so I would tell opportunities that I came across, hey, being here in Columbus, while it's a big city, it has a really small town feel. And so we knew a lot of the other players in the market space. And so I would just tell them, hey, go talk to so-and-so over there. They specialize in what it is that you need. And all I ask in return is that next time you hear somebody complaining about technology problems, mention my name first and give me first crack at it. And that's all I asked for. And so I did that. And what happened was a few times people started coming back to me and saying, hey, we went and met with your guy, but we didn't understand anything that he said in that meeting. Do you mind sitting in on the next meeting with us and making sure that, we get what we need and that we understand exactly what it is that we're buying? I said, sure. Once again, not asking for anything, just, okay, I'll do this, putting out good things in the ethos, knowing that eventually it'll come back to me. And so what happened was I held one of those meetings once, and a gentleman by the name of John, at the end of the meeting, he gives me an envelope with a check in it. He said, your time is worth something, take it. And he wouldn't let me get out without it. And so I get in the car and I open it up, and it was a check for $500. And I was just like, holy cow, I just made $500 for literally just translating for 45 minutes. Yeah. I was like, well, next time that somebody asks me if I'll sit in on one of these meetings, I'll see if there'll be one to pay for my time. And, a few months go by, and sure enough, somebody comes up and the opportunity presents itself. And I was like, would you be willing to pay for my time? And they're like, well, sure. And me wasn't expecting a yes. I was like, okay. So I was like, they're like, well, what's your rate? And I'm sheepishly like $100, and not even thinking that somebody had already given me 500. Why didn't I start there? But I wasn't thinking to be an entrepreneur. And that's, and so that's literally how my business started back in 2012 was after that, building that reputation of trust that says, hey, talk to AJ because he's going to shoot you straight. And if he can't help you, he's at least going to point you in the right direction. And once again, that all goes back to the military values that were instilled in me that I still try to carry to this day.
Very cool. So you went into the military with communications, you came out of the military and went into sales, and then left sales and came into ownership in the MSSP space. Just making sure I have this correct.
It seems like a natural transition. I mean,
that's the natural arc, isn't it?
Go wrong.
That's not the arc that everybody took. I thought
no.
That.
What's why? Very cool.
I think my project management really, really kind of lended myself into the ownership space from sales and project management, and being able to understand and analyze situations very quickly. Once again, military traits and skills, to be able to go in and do those things. And then, what I realized was that it was a unique skill set. When I started the company in 2012, and as I looked to try to grow and scale it, what I realized was it was hard for me to find people that could actually do those same things. As I looked to hire on people, I went and brought on some technical people and thought that I could, that they would be great, but the communication skills weren't necessarily there for my super technical people, and so that became a stumbling block. So then I went on the other side of the spectrum and said, I'll get good communicators, and by building out good processes, I'll be able to teach them how to do what it is that we do, and that was equally as bad. And so that's when in 2016, I started looking for different opportunities or different ways in which we could do things, and cybersecurity ended up being the way. And so we got a US-based SOC and all other kinds of cool stuff these days.
That's great. Now, is the SOC based in your location, or is that something?
No, it's not based. It's not based in Columbus. No.
Yeah.
No, it is US based, and our team is US based, but they're not all here in Columbus.
That's awesome.
So, people love hearing how, entrepreneurs fail and pick themselves back up. So you kind of glossed over the fact where you said, then you went into great communicators and that was equally as bad. Can you dive into that a little bit and maybe help other people who are, seeing a similar type of scenario going on in their business right now, other business owners?
Yeah, so the challenge was the role that we were trying to fill was as that virtual chief information officer or that fractional CIO. That's the role that I was filling whenever I came in. And it was the guy that sat in and said, hey, tell me strategically where your business is going, what you're trying to accomplish. And then my job and my goal was to help you to align technology so that you could get to your objectives faster. But at the same time, once you got there, you didn't have to reinvest in a whole bunch of new technology because we put solutions in place that were going to help to sustain you once you got to where you're trying to get to. And so with that premise in mind, that's where the struggle was. Getting for the technology guys that I was putting in place there and asking them to do kind of front end sales or be part of that sales process. The challenge with them was they couldn't see the bigger picture from a business standpoint, and so there were some gaps there. And then in addition to that, there were communication gaps where I'm going to say no fault of their own, their communication style just came across as a little bit gruff, a little bit rough around the edges, sometimes borderline condescending, but not intentionally, but that's just the way they came across. And so those were challenges that I faced on that side. So then whenever I over-index on the other side and said, I'll get good communicators, and I'll teach them enough and have good processes in place to be able to overcome their lack of knowledge. The reason why that was equally as bad is that if you don't understand technology and it's not something that you're passionate about, then understanding it becomes a really, really big challenge. Just understanding from network topology and setups and everything else like that, just the basic things of, hey, by analyzing and looking at the operational workflow of an organization, understanding how data moves throughout an organization and where manual processes are, and be like, oh, well, if we implement this technology solution or this type of technology solution, it'll streamline these processes. They couldn't put those dots together. And so then that's why I say it became equally as bad. Because it was just as challenging. It was just a different challenge. All in all, if I wanted to scale that business just as a VCIO and not really providing services, then I needed to have two of them together. I needed to have a tech that understood the technology and then the good communicator and team them up. And now you're talking about a lot of human capital, which then became cost prohibitive. And so that's why I started looking at different ways in which we could kind of scale this thing.
And I love that conversation because, it starts off very simply with the fact that you have shown something that I've tried to tell the MSP community is available to them. And that is that leadership for payroll, if you will. Too often we give that away in the service provider community where we don't focus enough time on it. And then we wonder why, sales stop or, initiatives don't get implemented and challenges like that. So, this is great to hear how you've kind of morphed that. And of course you do need to do something to scale because you're spot on. You can have the great communicator on the front end, the person that can be the visionary and really help define it. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to be there to tactically drive it forward as well. And I love the model that you're putting together there. Now, I think we're getting to that point where we might need to do a little transition. And before we get there, I think, Rob, you had a little something you wanted to share about your background that you have in common with AJ.
Yeah, I was in the military as well, sir. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm a little bit older than you, I think. When were you in?
So I went in 97 and got out in 01.
Okay, so I'm a little bit older. I went in 91, got out in 95, and I was 13 Bravo, 1 Papa.
You kidding,
so that's
Rob?
What I
you fought in Korea, buddy.
Big cannons and jumping out of airplanes was my time.
And that's really where I was going to go with this because AJ, obviously with the brain power that you were sharing, they determined that you were really important on the field. On the ground. Rob, they had no problem putting up in the plane and saying,
that's right. We were lawn darts.
You drop them out of the plane. It is what it is. But all kidding aside, to both of you guys, thank you so much for your service. We love hearing those stories. And I've said a number of times, if I have one regret in life, it isn't having served at one point in time in my life. And I thank you guys for what you do. But maybe okay, Rob, jump. No, Rob, go ahead.
No. I'm really curious about, what AJ is doing here.
Yeah. So, I really got passionate about helping veterans a few years ago. And so I heard the statistic, and I'm sure that you guys have probably heard it before as well, that 22 veterans commit suicide every day. And to me, that just broke my heart. I'm like, 22 of my brothers and sisters are giving up the fight only because they found it to be too difficult outside of the uniform. And so I started looking back at my own journey, saying, hey, I want to get involved. I want to help this. And talking with my wife, she's the one who pointed out to me, she was like, well, because originally I was like, I can talk to these guys and, I can help here because I can help them see if there's a brighter side, on the other side of things. And she politely told me, she said, you know what? She's like, maybe that's not the best position for you. I was like, well, why you say that? I was like, we relate, we understand each other. She's like, yeah. She's like, but if somebody is depressed and they're down and out, they don't want to hear your rah pick them up by their bootstraps message. She's like, your energy will inadvertently push them over. She's like, so you need to find another way. And so I was like, okay. So I started looking at things. I was like, well, looking at my own journey, like I said, I went in 97, got out in 01. So I was in between both wars, never saw combat, never got deployed overseas, but it still took me 3 to 4 years to really acclimate to civilian lifestyle. And so I started looking at why, and asking that question, why. And as I look back on it, there were two things that I lost whenever I transitioned out of the military that I didn't realize I was losing until years later. The first was I lost my sense of purpose and identity. When I was in the military, I was part of something bigger than myself, this big ideation of protecting freedom and democracy against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And when I was out, I was just AJ, and I didn't know who that was. I didn't know where I fit in. What is my purpose now? And so I struggled with that. The second thing that I lost, which was equally as important, was I lost my community. And I tell people this, when being in the military, it's a unique dynamic in the sense that, we could hate each other, but we knew that when it was time to go to work, I could trust you to do your job and protect my life, and you could trust me to do the same because the mission came first. Everybody coming home came second. And then after that, we can go back to our petty squabbles. And so having that type of community that you're surrounded with 24/7, 365, people that think and function the same way that you do, and you get out, and I went back home and my friends that I had back then, we just weren't on the same page. We didn't operate the same way. The civilian world didn't operate that way. And so now I found myself in this position where I'm struggling, trying to figure out who I am. I'm struggling to figure it out because now I'm trying to figure this out on my own. And now I find myself on this island, and I tell people whenever I transitioned out of the military, I wasn't depressed then. I was actually excited about what was coming next. I had all these great goals and aspirations. It wasn't until 8 or 9 months down the line where the job that I thought I was going to have wasn't anywhere to be found. And I found myself on that island trying to figure out who I am and trying to figure it out all by myself. That's whenever depression started creeping in. And that's when the suicidal thoughts started creeping in. And so having battled those things, I was like, all right, how can I help my fellow veterans who are still 20 years later, still struggling with these same things? And so in that vein, I was like, all right, well, what can I do to help them to find purpose outside the uniform? And in that vein, I came across a national nonprofit called Bunker Labs. And Bunker Labs is a national nonprofit headquartered out of Chicago. They've got 40 chapters across the country, and they specialize in helping veteran and veteran spouses who want to be entrepreneurs. So they'll help you go from ideation to business launch to growth, and growth to scale. They've got programming in place to help do all of those things. And so I became one of the leaders here in Ohio for that initiative. And so that became very fulfilling for me. And so we've been helping veterans to start businesses, those who already have businesses, helping them to scale and grow by connecting them with different resources, helping them to find funding opportunities, and all these different things. And so that's been extremely fulfilling over the past 3 years. And to kind of take that one step further, a group of us here in Ohio are in the process of starting up the Ohio Veteran Chamber of Commerce. And the reason why I'm taking that next step is that Bunker Labs is great because it focuses on entrepreneurship, but just as well as I do, not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur. And so what do we do with these veterans out there that are needing gainful employment? Because that was a challenge for me, was to find gainful employment, because I didn't know how to articulate my skills. I didn't understand where I fit into the civilian job market space or how to talk to hiring managers. And so through the years of me being in business, I've developed a lot of relationships with executives, and they all talk about, hey, we would love to hire veterans. We just don't know how to reach them. And at the same time, once we get them, what's our process for not only recruiting, but for retaining them? And so that's when the light bulb came on. It was like, okay, with this chamber, because when you think about any normal chamber, those are initiatives that they work on: workforce development, and how do we help businesses grow? Well, we can do that same stuff with a veteran focus. And so that's what we're doing.
Oh, that's amazing. That's absolutely fantastic. I've a very, very good friend of mine is just about to get out of the Air Force after being in for 21 and a half years. And he's going through a transitional period right now where he's actually got 6 months where he's still paid by the military, still paid by the Air Force, but he's transitioning into civilian life. And you know,
Are you
he's
familiar with
amazing.
that program?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
we've talked to them, and it's a fantastic program.
Yeah, it's the
He
Skills
actually,
Bridge program.
yes, he actually turned us onto that, and we reached out to somebody and talked to somebody within a couple hours of where Rob and I live, and we're on their radar for some of our next hires. But I mean, just the resources that are out there now. I mean, this Chamber of Commerce, how you're helping entrepreneurs. That's it's amazing because I can tell you just from my very good friend, he's nervous. You know, he hasn't been in civilian life since since we were in high school. I mean, literally since we were in high school. So trying to he's trying to picture his life in that next step, and things like what you're doing it's amazing. That's really amazing.
Well, and to that point, so here in Ohio, we're starting this thing up, and we're the 22nd state that actually has this thing going on, and so there's 21 other states that already have them has a Veteran Chamber of Commerce up and running, and so we all get together once a month as a coalition, so to speak, to kind of share best practices and just inform each other of what's going on in our different states and our regions and everything else like that, so that we can kind of work together to because at the end of the day, we have this one common goal, and that goal is how do we help our veterans to find success outside of the uniform?
Mhm.
Because there's hundreds of, well, in Ohio, a lot of people don't realize Ohio has the fifth largest veteran population in the country. And so with that, my whole thought process has always been there's hundreds of thousands of veterans that have made the transition to find success outside of uniform. We know and we're trained in the military, as Rob can attest, that we can always accomplish more together than we can individually. So why is it that we forget why do we forget that mentality whenever we get out of the uniform? Why is it that we're not reaching back and saying, hey, where are all of my veterans at? And this is where I'm at. And so that's the undercurrent that I'm trying to build here and that we're working on, is building this ecosystem where veterans can come together and say, okay, look, transitioning out of military service into civilian life is a challenge. These are some
Yeah.
of the challenges that you're going to face, but you don't have to do this alone. We're here as a community to help you.
AJ, that's a really interesting point, right? Because I think that is something that is interesting. And I don't think us as civilians, we see, we always think of the military and the way they're portrayed in them in movies and other areas of life as being this group of comrades that would do anything for each other. But the reality is you're just a bunch of people that were brought together in a specific circumstance from other walks of life. And when you do leave, that camaraderie leaves you, and it's tough to bring it back just because of geography. So I can see where that struggle really comes into play. And, it's so sad how many do have the challenge of finding their place in the next step. And, I think as a civilian community, we have to look at our veterans and say to ourselves, how do we bring them some of that camaraderie back into the equation? How can we help them form those bonds, which were really life or death for those that served in active duty,
Yeah.
and give them that ability to kind of make those connections again? Because I think all of us would agree, our individual companies, your coworkers become your family. But I think
Yeah.
there's a different kind of component to it when you're coming out at first and you're trying to find that family. And certainly what you're doing around cybersecurity speaks to a lot of the missions that the military talks about. It might be in a different context, but we're fighting the fight against the people that are doing evil all across the globe, right? Just in a different way.
Yeah.
I
I think
completely agree.
one of the things that and like whenever Tim and I are hiring, and we recruit for a lot of people,
Mhm.
one of the things that we try and relate to people, especially when people are coming out of the military, is look, they may have been in communications in the military, but when they come out, they can transition quickly into sales, or
Yeah.
they can we were highly structured. We knew chain of command, we understood all that kind of stuff. So just because you were fixing radio equipment or connecting a satellite doesn't mean that can't, those skill sets can't be moved to other places. And that's one of the things that we definitely try and talk to people about. And I think it's one of those very important things that I look at my military service like my MBA. That's how I look at
Yeah.
it. Like I did a secondary degree and it was in the military, and that's how I try and like talk to other people about it as well.
Mhm.
You know, so that's how I did it. But I completely agree with you. I lost my structure. I was rudderless. I didn't have any accountability. I didn't know what was going on. I went from a highly organized, knew who my boss was, knew who I was the boss of. I knew all my structures, all my processes, everything. And the next day I was literally driving from North Carolina to Florida. I was just in my little bitty truck. It was just weird. It's a completely weird thing.
Well, and it's an abrupt cutoff as well,
Yeah.
and I think that's one of the things that, I realized looking back on it was that, you go through 2 weeks, well, back then, and I
Yep.
believe
2
it's
weeks.
changed now, but it
Yep.
was 2 weeks of out processing.
Yep.
And let's be honest, whenever it's time for me to out process, those 2 weeks, I had to go to classes. And what was told to me was, be in these classes, make sure your name is on the roll call, because if you don't, then you don't get out and you're not going to
Yeah.
get your DD 214. So for
Yep.
me, it was like, I'm here for roll call. That's it. And I have paid attention. So that's equally on my part.
At best, half paid
At best,
attention.
I have paid attention.
Yeah.
And so I didn't catch any of the information or
Yeah.
retain any of the information that was taught in those transitions.
No.
And so then it comes to the end. I get my DD 214, I get my plane ticket to go home. They're like, have a good life. And it
Yeah.
was literally that abrupt of a cutoff.
Yeah.
The next day I wake up and I'm a civilian with the world is my oyster. I could do what I want, which
Yeah.
on one hand is cool, fun, and exciting. On the other hand, it's terrifying because
Yeah,
where do
sure.
I go?
Yeah.
What do I now do? And the first couple of days, so this is why I tell transitioning service members, especially those that are coming back to Ohio that get connected with me, I say, take the first few weeks and just get comfortable being home.
Yeah.
Decompress, get comfortable being home. Don't worry about finding a job, because we can help you find a job. I think that's the biggest thing, is that now a lot of the stigmas have changed. A lot of people's attitudes have changed, because now they're starting to realize, especially in this fluctuating workforce market, that hiring veterans, you're going to get somebody who is an out of the box thinker. You're going to get somebody who's going to show up and complete the job and complete the task, whatever you give them. They're going to complete those tasks, because we're trained failure is not an option.
Yep.
And if something does go wrong, they're going to come back to you with ideas and solutions, because we're trained to figure out how to solve problems. And so businesses are starting to see the value in hiring veterans. And so now, like I said, I'm at the point now where we've got people that want to hire veterans. Now we just got to create a pipeline to where we can actually get these veterans in front of these people so that they can take advantage of these opportunities.
AJ, do you do any like resume help or anything like that? Because I remember when I came out, I was like, okay, and this was before pretty much the internet, right?
Yeah.
And so like I was doing my resume off of those basic, I can't remember what the program was called back then, but like I had no idea. I was in combat arms. I went from an M16 to a Word doc program on some computer somewhere, trying to figure out in the library how to do this thing. So what do you guys do to help that crazy transition there?
Yeah, so I was the same way, Rob. So don't feel bad. I mean, and that was the reason why it was so hard for me to find a job coming out, because on my resume it was communication specialist, Army, 4 years.
Yeah.
And that was it. I didn't
Yeah.
know how to articulate any of my skills of,
Yeah.
I had leadership skills and this, that, and that. I didn't know how to articulate that on paper, let alone in person. So I didn't interview well either. And so those are things, there are organizations that we've partnered with that will provide those services of helping you to revamp your resume. There's also a software program out there. There's a couple of them out there, but one that I'm familiar with intimately, which will take your military existence, your whole career, you entered into their system, and it takes your classification, how long you did this job, and everything else like that, and it will help to map those skill sets to civilian jobs. And so they work with big organizations like Amazon and Verizon for all their job openings. If you go to their website and say, I've got a job opening and I'm a veteran, then you're utilizing their platform. It actually takes your military career and directly maps it to every job that Verizon or AWS has available for them.
Hey guys, well, unfortunately, we're running near the end of our time, but I think AJ, we have certain guests we'd love to have come back again, and I think maybe in 6 months it'd be great to have you come back and tell us some of the progress that the programs are making and what new opportunities might be available out there, and of course, bring us up to speed on what's new with you as well.
Would love to. I appreciate this time and opportunity for you guys giving me the chance to share with your audience just my passion for helping veterans and the value that I think that they can bring to any organization. So I would definitely welcome an opportunity to come back anytime in the future.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you very much, AJ. We really appreciate you joining us here today. For anybody that is looking to get a hold of AJ, we will be including his LinkedIn profile with appropriate links with the podcast. So, please reach out, ask him any questions that you may have. This episode will be up on mspbusinessschool.com and anywhere you get your podcast, to include YouTube. So please like and subscribe if you get a chance. And we do ask you to send us any questions that you may have for future episodes, and we'd love to chat about them. AJ, Brian, if you're there, Brian,
I'm always
Tim,
here, man.
Man.
fellas,
Decent
me, military is near and dear to my heart. So AJ, I really appreciate you being on the show today, and look forward to having you back again.
Yeah, it was great having you on.
Thanks,
Thanks,
AJ.
guys.
Appreciate it.